Sometime between 5,000 and 6,000 years ago, someone looked out upon a desolate plain of sun-scorched mud and said, "Yep, this is the spot." Welcome to Mesopotamia, land between two rivers, also known as the birthplace of, well, everything. Farming, writing, cities, and most importantly, taxes.
Thanks, buddy.
And what a place to start. Imagine waking up in 3500 BCE, surrounded by endless mudflats that stretch so far you start questioning reality. If you were lucky, you might spot a few reddish-brown reeds, or, on a good day, a lonely date palm tree clinging to life. No rocks, no trees, just mud. And occasionally, angry mud, the kind of mud that sweeps away your house, crops, and optimism. And the skies? A meteorologist's nightmare. Endless heat punctuated by storms so violent, they make tornadoes look like interpretive dance. The rivers, Tigris and Euphrates, casually threaten to drown you with floods one day and ghost you completely the next. And speaking of floods, Mesopotamians faced a special kind of disaster tourism. The worst floods always arrived right at harvest time. Because why not? Civilization's first farmers could spend months nurturing crops only to watch them float away like someone else's problem. This is home. Despite the harsh conditions, early Mesopotamians figured out irrigation because nothing says optimism like telling a river what to do. They diverted water from the Tigris and Euphrates to grow barley, wheat, and enough dates to make your dentist cry. The result? Surpluses. And surpluses meant fewer farmers and more specialists like potters, weavers, and priests who made a living telling everyone to give them stuff to sacrifice. But Mesopotamians weren't just about farming and praying for dry weather. They gave us the wheel, possibly in hopes of being able to do donuts in all that mud, and the sailboat, perfect for floating over those inconvenient floods. And let's not forget bronze. Around 3300 BCE, they started melting tin and copper together, inventing stronger tools, weapons, and let's face it, more creative ways to fight. But their greatest hits? Writing and time itself. The Sumerians invented cuneiform, symbols pressed into clay, so you could finally keep a record of who hadn't paid their taxes yet.
Buddy.
The Mesopotamians invented math, although theirs was based on the number 60 instead of 10. Seriously, how many fingers did these guys have? They gave us a calendar divided into 12 months. And later, the Babylonians, not to be outdone, created the 60-minute hour and the 360-degree circle. Mesopotamians were polytheistic, fancy talk for too many gods to keep track of. They believed in about 2,000 deities called the Anunnaki, which means there was a god for everything: storms, rivers, beer brewing, and probably the guy who made clay tablets dry too fast. Their chief god, Anu, was king of the sky. And let's just say he wasn't great at small talk. Then there was Enlil, the storm god, who seemed to specialize in wiping out crops and drowning livestock. And of course, there's Enki, the god of wisdom, who saved humanity by warning one guy, Utnapishtim, that Enlil was planning a flood of biblical proportions. Utnapishtim, whose name means Noah but harder to say, built a boat, loaded up his family, and outsailed the apocalypse. So yes, Mesopotamians invented floods and survival boats long before Hollywood made it cool. Mesopotamians didn't have stone or timber, so they built their cities out of mud bricks, because nothing says long-term plan like walls that melt in the rain. Their crowning achievement? The ziggurat. Think pyramid, but with flat tops and more stairs, perfect for priests to climb when they needed to yell at the gods. Each level got smaller as it rose, because ancient architects apparently liked playing Jenga, with architecture. These structures weren't just temples, they were cosmic Wi-Fi hotspots, connecting Earth to heaven. Downside? They had to be continuously maintained because, well, mud. Women in Mesopotamia had a mixed bag. Most spent their days crushing grain, cooking, and teaching kids how not to drown during floods. But wealthier women, they got to run businesses, own property, and even file lawsuits, because nothing says feminism like ancient litigation. Some women even managed divorces, probably after their husbands lost the family ox in a bad trade deal. And if you were lucky enough to be related to the king, congratulations, you skipped the grind and went straight to palace life. Early Mesopotamians didn't mess around with governance. They built cities like Ur, Uruk, and Babylon, complete with ziggurats, temples, and enough bureaucracy to make modern governments look chill. At its height, the city of Uruk had 80,000 residents, with 10,000 people living on the same amount of land that used to support one hunter-gatherer. Its population density rivaled that of present-day Buenos Aires. And who ran this divine circus? Priests. These guys claim to speak for the gods, which is a great gig if you enjoy power and never want to do manual labor. Mesopotamian cities were essentially theocracies, government by holy men. Because what could go wrong with mixing religion and politics? Each city-state had its own ruler and gods. But eventually, rulers got ambitious and started uniting city-states under one big empire. The Mesopotamians didn't just invent cities and laws, they also pioneered the fine art of building empires. And what's an empire without drama, ambition, and a few thousand casualties? Meet Sargon the Great, history's first overachiever. Around 2334 BCE, he united the squabbling city-states of Mesopotamia under one banner, creating the Akkadian Empire, the world's first multinational political experiment. And what did Sargon do with all this power? He invented empire building as we know it. Roads, trade networks, and even a postal service. Yep, the Akkadians had mail long before anyone could even write. But like all good things, the Akkadian Empire didn't last. After about 180 years of glory, it collapsed faster than one of their mud brick ziggurats during a flood. Why? Climate change, invasions, and probably too many clay tablet memos. A couple of hundred years later, King Hammurabi of Babylon decided he was going to be in charge of everything. He didn't just conquer territory, he organized it, laying down rules that ranged from fair trade to, well, eye for an eye justice. Around 1754 BCE, Hammurabi decided Mesopotamia needed rules, 282 of them, which he found scattered around his empire. These weren't just suggestions. They were laws carved in stone. Literally, which is about as permanent as you can get without email. The Code of Hammurabi covered everything: marriage, property, contracts, and how many oxen you owe someone if you break their fence. And it wasn't subtle. The punishment for stealing? Death. The punishment for lying? Death. The punishment for bad construction work? You guessed it, death. But it wasn't all doom and gloom. Hammurabi claimed he was called to bring about the rule of righteousness and protect the weak. Sounds noble. Until you realize his idea of justice included cutting off hands and poking out eyes like Mesopotamian reality TV. And if you think bureaucracy today is bad, Hammurabi's laws required scribes, judges, and witnesses for everything. Buying a goat? Better have your clay tablet notarized. But empires rise and empires fall. After Hammurabi's death, Babylon went downhill fast, eventually getting sacked in 1595 BCE by the Hittites, who showed up with iron weapons, grabbed some goodies, and left the city in ruins. But hey, At least they introduced Mesopotamia to the Iron Age. The Akkadians may have invented empires, but the Assyrians perfected the art of intimidation. These guys weren't here to make friends, they were here to conquer, and they did it with iron weapons, battering rams, and a reputation that made their enemies surrender just to avoid getting skinned alive. For reals. At their height, from 911 to 609 BCE, the Assyrian Empire stretched from Iran to Egypt, making it the biggest empire the world had ever seen. Their capital, Nineveh, was home to massive walls, towering palaces, and one of the first libraries, because even ruthless conquerors need bedtime stories. But the bigger they are, the harder they fall. After centuries of ruling with fear, the Assyrians finally collapsed under a wave of rebellions and invasions, proving that terror only works until someone with a bigger army shows up. While Mesopotamian empires were busy smashing each other with swords, the Phoenicians were sailing circles around them. These guys were the ancient world's master traders, turning the Mediterranean into their personal shopping mall. Their most famous invention? The color purple, or more specifically purple dye, which they made from murex shellfish, so expensive it was basically the ancient version of Gucci, and would get a certain future famous Italian killed. But their biggest contribution was the alphabet, because after centuries of scribes hogging the clay tablets, the Phoenicians decided writing should be easier and more accessible. Their alphabet influenced Greek and Roman scripts and later our own, proving that sometimes the pen, or stylus, really is mightier than the sword. Finally, we arrive at the Persians, who took empire building to the next level. Under Cyrus the Great, they created the largest empire the ancient world had ever seen, spanning from India to Greece. Unlike the Assyrians, the Persians preferred diplomacy over terror, at least until diplomacy failed. They built roads, established a postal service, because why not copy the Akkadians, and respected local customs, letting conquered people keep their gods and languages as long as they paid taxes.
Thanks, buddy.
But even great empires have expiration dates. In 334 BCE, Alexander the Great rolled in and toppled the Persians faster than you can say, nice postal service. And there you have it, the Mesopotamian empires, from Sargon's postal routes to Hammurabi's laws, from Assyrian terror tactics to Persian postal routes. They laid the groundwork for everything we call civilization today. Governments, writing, trade, and, most importantly, the fine tradition of conquering your neighbors. Next time, we set sail for Egypt and the Nile, where the deserts are hot, the pyramids are pointy, and the gods are just as crazy.